Hi, everyone. Wow, it just got very quiet. Oh, the doggy bag makes a little rustling noise, so I'll be careful not to touch it again. Hello, welcome to the Kelly Writers House. There are some books and some beautiful broadsides, which you probably have already passed on your way into the space. Please don't forget to check those out before you leave tonight. I'm Julia Block. I'm director of the Creative Writing Program, and I'm really, really excited to be introducing this program to you tonight. And I also want to say, backing 2 sentences before what I just said, I think probably both Julian and Cindy would be open to the possibility of signing books and broadsides for you tonight if you pick those up. I see Cindy nodding. Julian, is that something that, okay, Julian gave me a thumbs up, so that's good. Okay, so first I want to say something about the larger context for this reading, which is that in February 2020, Gwendolyn Beetham of the Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies program and I teamed up to submit a proposal to bring Julian Brolaski to Penn all the way from California for a mini residency in trans and environmental poetry, poetics, and performance. And then Bethany Wiggin at the Penn program in environmental humanities awarded us the grant to bring Julian here, and then COVID happened. So here we are many, many, many months later in October 2021, all masked up except for me because I'm up here and the speakers up here are allowed to take their masks off briefly. And we're here under the rain tent with the beautiful heat lamps at Kelly Writers House, and we're finally able to welcome Julian to campus, and we're so thrilled to kick off their residency with tonight's reading. So stay tuned throughout the year for more opportunities to connect to Julian, who I'm thrilled to report is also here in Philly all year long as part of the Pew residency program. And I want to say a special thank you to my co-organizer, Gwendolyn Beetham, who is unable to join us tonight, but is very much here in spirit. Tonight, I am very happy to introduce our first reader, Cynthia Arrieu-King, who's going to be reading before Julian. Arrieu-King's new book is called The Betweens from Noemi Press, and it came out in 2021 this year, and it's a highly acclaimed experimental memoir of lyrical prose blocks. Cindy's poetry inquires after the dislocated individual, interrogates the notion of race, and explores connections between strangers. Shane McCrae has written that The Betweens is an honest racial reckoning, meaning it is not at all straightforward, meaning it moves beyond the black and white dichotomy, which of course is itself not at all straightforward, to guide the reader by a resonant prose that perfectly complements the indelible content toward a more complete understanding of race in America. Cynthia Arrieu-King is a former Kunneman Fellow and Associate Professor of Creative Writing at Stockton University. Please help me welcome her back to the Kelly Writers House.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to not wear a mask because normally people can't hear me anyway, so. Okay. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you so much, Julia. And I'm really honored to be reading with Julian. Thanks for coming out. If you're in the back and you need a seat, there's a couple seats up here in the front. Warren's acting like he's buying a book, so I will keep going. Okay, so I had the really good fortune of having a couple things come out this year. I have a book called Continuity from Octopus Books come out. I'm going to read a couple poems from that, and then I'm going to read a little bit from The Betweens, and I'm from Kentucky. That's what I'm going to say before this poem. Deep fake. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, by the way. Deep fake. What is the Uncanny Valley? Asked the student, and I draw the graph on the board and point to the lowest point and then move up the slope. This is like a scarecrow, and it's kind of shaped like a human, but you're not sure. This is where you'd put a mannequin on the graph. This is where you'd put, say, a lifelike sex doll. And right here where this dip is, that's where you just reach for your knife. People go back to observations said from the 60s and say, wow, they were such prophets. Why do people think it's a prophecy when it's that things are not changing? The story has not evolved. Today, I was standing in the yard while the dog ate grass and surveillance planes took off and landed in the airfield. The caravan at 1 a.m. blaring stereos, honking horns and yelling, "Wake up!" because the cops who killed Breonna Taylor still have their jobs and have not been charged. When my brother and his wife say through the open window of the truck that the video was fake because the girlfriend is silent after they shoot her boyfriend, there's no way you could be silent then. I wonder how many faked videos they have seen at the same time that I wonder how they don't know she is silent out of terror. My brothers taught me when I was little, while we watched cop shows, that a cop can only shoot in self-defense. The other person has to shoot first. Otherwise, the cop can't touch them. Today, I read the headline that if you have an AI and enough photos of a person's face, that you can create news that seems real, that your likeness could be altered into what seems to be you. And this means that we have to rely on the people we know. Where is the looking at the face? Where is the human wrinkle upon wrinkle that you cannot fake in any way? I feel that every time I see a face that makes my stomach hurt, I look below it and it says, this is not a real person. This is a computer-generated person. Your brothers tell you years in advance there's going to be a civil war. They say it'll happen in 2016, but it doesn't happen. They say in April, but it doesn't happen. It's just a lot of people believing an orchestration that alone would do nothing. They say there's going to be trouble, you should move up here, or we'll bring you an automatic rifle. You say, bring me an automatic baseball bat or a taser. Do you know your neighbors? I ask one brother, and he says he doesn't, and he doesn't care about them. He only cares about his family. He just wants to protect them. And I think about how many people it takes to sew up a wound, and hours, and silence or low music, and so many hands to get the clamp and the daub and the stitches tight and effective. My brother is worried that the other brother will get killed in a riot. Because do I know what the police started out as? Slave patrol, I say, but I don't understand how he's not worried that our brother will kill someone in a riot. Who do you think I'm going to shoot when someone barges into the house? Love thy neighbor versus know thy neighbor. Really know. Rankine saying, I do projects instead of individual poems because I believe in historical moments. Because how could you possibly tell what is really happening in one moment? One needs a whole frieze, a whole constellation of moments to consider before the lies we are telling ourselves reveal themselves. Then I say to the brother through the open window of his truck, it seems like the cops are full of people from the KKK, and he and his wife laugh a weird, high, nervous laugh. I remember getting struck by the rubber bullet and my entire body flooding with something more vivid than adrenaline, and putting my hand up and looking at everyone to make sure I could walk off safely. My brothers looked out from behind their barrels and columns. I spent the rest of the afternoon watching them shoot my nephew and each other. Charity has the word for flesh in it. Fussing at John back in the day because he never remembered to lock the door. Aren't you worried about intruders or robbers? I asked. And he grumbles, no, because to him danger doesn't come from outside the house, but inside the house. You boil your father's life down to a thesis. What's the thesis? The interviewer asked me. I said for mine, build something out of nothing. And she says, For her father, it's learned by doing. We don't practice for death. We practice for... And years later, I think how you sometimes now can't tell if you're looking at the real thing or something false. The photo of the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone barrier spliced with the photo of a masked man carrying an assault rifle, or the Minneapolis precinct on fire being titled, Seattle, Crazy City. When I was 20, I told my dad I was going to the grocery store, but I went to a friend's. I don't even know why I told him that. I came home and went upstairs to where he was reading in bed. It was the first time I had really lied to him. He looked up from his book and said, "Where did you go?" And I said, "To the grocery." And he said, "Why are you lying to me?" I don't tell my brothers what I think of their guns, except that I tell them Mom doesn't want them in her house. Instead, I tell the one he's drunk the Kool-Aid and the other that he should be careful. Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam will no longer use guns in their cartoons. What will they do instead? Hundreds of decals, t-shirts, cartoons, lunchboxes, underwear, sheets in which they still carry a gun. My brothers saying my dad thinking BB rifles were fine, that he was fine with guns, as if that's the same as the Kalashnikov you put in his closet. This isn't true. I don't understand him anymore, Dad said to me so many times. He thinks like a soldier. Mistrust of people who cannot understand a jasmine crown. Mistrust of people who seem to be threatened. Mistrust of people who send memes. Stage acting is all about addressing the ghost of your father, and being in films is about silence. How being a stage actor is a bouquet. A film actor is the whole garden. Dad saying, sometimes you can't tell if you're doing the right or wrong thing. Sometimes all you can do is pray. And I'm just going to read a little bit from The Betweens. Which is about 80 pages of one paragraph after another, and there's kind of no break, but each paragraph is related to the next one. So don't worry, you're going to make it. It's going to be, I'm going to say about 8 minutes. Okay. One day, a kid in my kindergarten class pulls out a tray of alphabetic blocks. He bothers me, but I can't remember what he said. I go off in the corner to get a little distance, but in memory, it's all approximate. My Chinese father drives me home with my older brother in the car. He claims the school called to say I had punched someone. He is proud of me. I have the distinct knowledge this never happened. I have never punched anyone in the face. But I also know it's making my dad proud of me. I sit in the back of the car and say nothing. My father might have imagined I was getting picked on for how I look, or a fight of his own. It's the first instance I remember of letting silence negotiate the remnants of a trauma. In a dream I had as a little girl, I'm sitting in the living room and someone wants to come in the house. I try to block them by putting my dollhouse up against the bottom of the door, but they crawl somehow into the dollhouse as a small person, grow bigger into a villain who's there to do something to my family. As a teen, I dream about hiding in pianos, cupboards, floating up to the ceiling. I did not live through any wars, travel any oceans while a child, but these nightmares, in which I practice being invisible, feel inherited. The poet Farid Matuk talks about his daughter's night terrors. If he says he loves her, she screams more. If he says he's related to her, she screams more. If he says he will hug her, she screams more. She screams for half an hour every night. He realizes the only thing he can do is back off and be absolutely quiet. Another way the silence does so much work. I noticed that Chinese people didn't think of me as Chinese. I told my dad how they'd say I wasn't a real Chinese. I felt stuck in a gray area between this reaction and the reaction to my playing piano, to good grades, to being quiet, that I was very Asian. My mom and dad kept neutral faces as I told the story and said not to say anything about it, to be quiet, let it ride, not to let my upset show. Le non-agir, have no reaction. The one who fights is losing, my dad would say. I step onto the subway in New York City, and I'm suddenly overwhelmed by the feeling that every person is someone I know from the past, that they are all about to recognize me and tell me how we met. And then after some time passes, I step out of the concourse to the rail where people wait for visitors at JFK. I see all the brown people pressed up against the railing, waiting with flowers. On seeing their faces, I lose the anticipation of one of them saying hello, since they won't know me, at the same time that I lose the anxiety I feel around white people's perceptions and expectations. When I'm 35, I make friends with a Korean-American poet who laughs at all my jokes. When I'm with my family, I'm happy, but feel all the sadness of growing up. When I'm with Juliet's family, they joke, they eat, they talk about trips and play a board game about buying lumber and clay. Juliet and her siblings badger their mother to take a trip with them. She doesn't see the point, prefers to stay home and watch the birds fly and the flowers grow. As I drive home, I realize I feel happy and alert, which I haven't in ages. The same Korean-American friend has office hours with a white student. They talk about the student's paper and her plans for the future. When it's time for the student to leave, she gets up and bows to my friend as if they are in Japan, then catches herself and apologizes. My friend starts to laugh. I meet my childhood friend for the first time in 25 years. I can see from Facebook she's been living in North Carolina. Her husband has a farm, she has 3 teenagers, and she often thanks God in her posts. As I drive to meet her, I'm not sure whether we'll see eye to eye on the state of the nation and the world. I show her a photo of one of my students, who I think looks just like Jenny, though my student is wearing a hijab. My grandmother hears I am visiting with this old childhood friend and says, "Jenny, this was a long time ago," and goes back to watching the television news. Every time it comes on, she asks me if the person who is president is really the president, and then makes a shocked noise. She doesn't always recall when I have been there visiting her. Then suddenly she knows, though it's clear too, she has made survival out of a certain kind of forgetting. Radiant flux is an electromagnetic wave emitted. Luminous flux is the human eye sensitivity to wavelengths across distance. Often out of the dim space of my mind, I see affinities glimmer, sometimes a far waver like 1 lumen of history on a lightless field. I chat with a new colleague about spam musubi, and we chat about how spam fried rice does not have a cute little story behind it, and laugh darkly. Or I tell a friend about a piece of Maoist propaganda hung in a local nonprofit, and she sends back the forehead slap emoji. These small confirmations from such far, far distances. Almost over. When she taught me to sew, my mother constantly reminded me to use the thimble, that I should learn to use it to push the needle through. Her thimble always fell off of me because it was too big. I would go to bed with pain in my finger where I'd push the end of the needle through fabric with my bare fingertip. Even now, in middle age, I see an archivist and restorer of 18th century garments urges her viewers to wear a thimble for a whole list of reasons. I hear in her voice a relish for technique and discipline. I know I'm never going to wear a thimble. That simple protection from pain. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That was amazing. I'm very happy to introduce our second reader, PPEH resident Julian Talamantez Brolaski. Julian's poetry asks vital questions about how we use language to convey the lived experience of identity. Julian's work deals with issues of indigeneity, resistance, queer, two-spirit, trans, and mixed-race identity. And the most immediately distinctive aspect of these poems is their combination of contemporary English vernacular, Apache dialects, and Renaissance and Middle English. The linguistic ambition is adventurous, challenging, and thrilling, especially when it veers, as it often does, into bold political argument or frank eroticism. Yet this ambition is not just about seeing how far language can go. Rather, these poems show us the limits of language to capture difference, and they then surpass those limits in order to create a new kind of language. I know of no other poet writing today whose use of multilingualism is as imaginative or as exhilarating in its technical bravado, expressive breadth, or ethical commitments. Brolaski's 2011 book, Gowanus, Atropolis, is full of intertexts, puns, and nonce words that altogether make up a dense, elusive, and lyrical meditation on the relationship between gender and grammar. The witty linguistic moves in a poem like What Is My Anatomy begin with its title, which draws on older forms of English to ask a variation on the question, what is my gender? Because standard English is insufficient to capture the question's nuance. Brolaski writes, when one has no need of a prosthesis, one invents a grammatical order. In these 3 short lines, the poem brilliantly captures the way our identities are made legible by grammar, or the system of relationships between words, and how for some of us the only option for self-realization is to invent a completely new language order. Brolaski's 2017 book of Mongrelitude, a finalist for the 2018 Lambda Literary Award for Transgender Poetry, plays with linguistic codes, gender-neutral and gender-variant pronouns, and sonnet forms, and also includes crossed-out words and superscripts and other visual cues to heighten poetic effects and call attention to difference along sexual and gender difference. The book's stunning final poem invokes the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting of Latinx and Black, queer, and trans people in Orlando, Florida, alongside the 1871 Camp Grant massacre of more than 100 Apache people near Tucson, Arizona. Linguistic play, intertextuality, and historical allusions coalesce in a voice of lament and protest. In a poem called Pronoun Circle Jerk and the Dog Charlie, Julian writes, I told the group they would call me it, you know, like the sky and the grass. And I note this because this linguistic play manifests so frequently in the work in terms of pronouns. In an interview, it elaborated, people have told me it makes them uncomfortable. They feel like it might be dehumanizing me. And I'm like, exactly. For me, it's expansive rather than degrading. It's actually an honor to be an it. This effort to embrace it as a personal pronoun is such a beautifully radical act, one that places the human on the same scale as the sky or the grass or the bird of the poem, and an example of Brolaski's commitment to the public-facing aspects of its artistic practice. As I consider the profound nature of Brolaski's work, I find myself returning to the lines, when one has no need of a prosthesis, one invents a grammatical order. The word prosthesis derives from a Latin term meaning the addition of a letter or syllable to a word to form a new one. The more modern meaning of prosthesis is the substitution of an absent body part with an artificial one. Brolaski's poem draws on both meanings, suggesting that instead of fixing a body to make it conform to convention, one can instead invent a new language altogether. Julian Brolaski is one of a very few poets working right now that I know of to make that work of invention accessible and realized, and the only one I know of to be doing this sort of work in this particular way at the intersection of poetry, linguistics, music, and history. Please help me welcome Julian Talamantez Brolaski to the Kelly Writers House. I've removed the doggy bag from your microphone. I'll just hang on to it.
I love the changing of the doggy bag. Am I supposed to put one on, or do I just ride naked? That was so generous. Thank you. I just have to say, before we get started, that the you in my poems is you and not you. I mean, it can be you if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be. So when I say I love you, I mean you. But don't feel like it has to be you. It's you, and it isn't you. It's whatever you want. In the source of the scene, I took to oversplain. With fish and flower and sullen sparrows did I disport, calmly walking upon the tide. Heel of my shoe betide upon my shoe. Yeah, that's what I said. Heel of my shoe betide upon my shoe. Before the boring marrow of my heart, I mean one to flick ash unto. No, I mean boring, like boring into, as in like eyes of Gomorrah coal, the ones you'd want to cook your pizza. Hey, take my hand. Let's pretend it isn't a plague. Is that egregious to say plague? Well, some friends of mine, I could say, are not the same. A ceremony of sparrows aflutter in the pear tree, fuck, the shit in the road and the contrast of it all, teaching me what I like. There's a salty penny on my tongue and a rose stuck through a hole in my ear, and I'm in the sultry air, under a throbbing and dribbling AC, yay, and my heart is in my hands again. You'll laugh, I know. But I'm done feeling churlish for my ways. I listened to how the tambourines were like to roar, but failing that, were content to jingle jangle. Because that I was raised up on money, and for the lack of it as a child, can you dance me? And can you dance me just so, with my feet upon your feet? Well, you saw the poetry in it when I didn't. No, I saw the poetry in it too. Who am I kidding? Certainly not you, 'cause it's you I love, you I love, you I love. Take me out for ice cream. I don't want to burn things down anymore, even the shitty Froyo place. I'm going to say what I want from now on, not what I don't want. Turns out the most fucked up looking fenders are the most expensive. They call it a heavy relic, like a telly or a strap with the paint rubbed away. I used to call this false antiquity and decried it in jeans, but I gotta admit, I'm pretty into this relicking look on a guitar. Why would you listen to me? I'm up here. Why would you listen to me? I got a mic and that backbeat, baby, 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 baby. Tell me something I don't know. I'm tired of hearing the wind through a tiny aperture. Tell me a thing I haven't thought of, like how scythens with a net you seek to catch the wind. I can fleek utterly and utterly. Show me how to pump my dick till it's as savage as a clit. Show me the underlining of your rail guards. Show me your skin. I'll trade all of my saguaros for a single come what may. The clouds are nectarine pink. I should just stop right now. So I want to thank Julia again for inviting me here, and Gwendolyn, and the PEN Creative Writing program, and the Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies program, and also the PEN program in Environmental Humanities. And thank you, Cindy, my new friend in Philadelphia, for reading with me. I really love your poems. Oh, thank you. This is called As If a Horse on Fancy Dancer Day. When the horse would step sideways to itself, when it go, redolent of our days spent pleasantly among the clovers. When it opened its third eye up, that is the blaze on its forehead, that is the star on its eyelet, that is the horn outcropping, that is the fissure through which the enemy can slip, that is where I place my kiss. When it bend its knee to pray, when it bend its knee to pray and says, what did you think? And what did you think? And I've been here before, and I was standing here before, and I've been standing at your attention all along, and I've been kneeling here at your attention, been standing and kneeling at your attention, and I've been kneeling and standing unbeknownst to your attention all along. Like that star you thought was the light of a house. Been there all along, it's been here this whole time, joking with you. And as you smoked, it too blew out a puff of smoke. And like the ochre mesas in the sunset, crouching like lions, been here all along, been here all along, been there all along, like when it bend its knee to pray, and when it bend its knee to pray, and when its song is in its throat, and when its heart is in its knee. In the cut. Person of clear salt water, warm, clear deer. The mosquitoes, I am delicious to them because of my fairy or my Indian blood. He's immune to poison ivy because Indians don't call it poison. Utter unfaith in humanity. The leaves that don't turn right. The leaves so that they don't know how to turn right. When the guy at the bodega complained about white people and gentrifications, you said, me and my friend are native. I'm Suquamish, look it up. I vaporized the weed we had for breakfast when I come home from the poetry reading, thinking how low and how lively we know of the cut. Dropped my parasol in a ditch. Pretend it didn't happen. There was a mountain lion stalked the town, and of a moonless night weaved among the jack-o'-lanterns and took its fill of dozing sparrows and left behind French fry fats and eased up the hill before dawn, licking its paws, easy peasy. Sometimes people had discarded tater tots or even fried chicken, detritus of the combustion of their prattle. In the corn maze and in the jumpy castle alike could be found scattered cherry gummies or the crust left on the stick of a corn dog, a delicacy one could really ruminate upon. There were the cotton candies that fairly combusted on your tongue. There was the spontaneous clamor of clay pigeons dipping and tilting millimeters from bullets, who, like the lion, kept the red in the engine of their blood. Didn't matter what kind or how, we fucked anyway. Meanwhile, nature's taken over, and we've been already settled into its overture. Curvaceous, flattened, curvaceous. Love all the hordes of creatures. Love the bat. Love the pangolin. I step into my pants foot by foot, what once were hooves, who walked with a limping walk in the end times. No, a mostly bodied person in the quarantimes. An Olympian chomping on a cherry, licorice of my ire and my same-sex attraction and my general attraction to my fellow human, the one rubbing me down with a mask on and then vibrates a tuning fork along my spine, gonging a bell around my ear and leaves the room, leaves me with the rose quartz and the gay Buddha he didn't know he'd conjured. And it peels down my Adidas. It wants to see my scars. I was howling at the moon. I had the COVID-19 blues. I was here with all of you. I loved you. And it was easier to love you, frankly, because I was disembodied. And as for the disembowelment of my distress, well, who would think to love me less? The new cigarette. Pine of the times, and of my erstwhile elephantine heart, crying brutal tears whilst stabbing at its own breast like the pelican was said to have done, to feed its blood to its young. Or La Llorona wandering the plain, weeping her estate. Children drowned, love forlorn and forsaken, and herself merely a spirit in a diaphanous wilderness. Or Nunashish with a cry like a whippoorwill, lonesome whippoorwill of Hank Williams' song, who can somehow sing but not weep. No, not like that, nor like Ernest Tubb walking the floor, but like a fox pouncing on a purple urchin under the sea with a certainty and with a lavish success. Elsewise, quarter-wise, a habit was just a thing I wore, exultant grave upon my body, longing for death in metal stirrups, and lambs punctuated with brief aplomb. Oh, a plum in my side saddle. Let's pull it out and stick our tongue in it, baby. Orion's junk is just below his belt, with variable stars not yet named, and I in my handkerchief, I in my not quite wool hat, my cut-off gloves of yesteryear. But what makes these glove upon my wings? And what makes these wings at my feet and at my wings? Or a drapery artfully placed, demure as a surf poncho, or merely a spirito with a common progress, a post-coital popsicle? They call Eros the bittersweet. It's worse than a cliche for being so continuously and profoundly true, you can't help feeling some version of it if ever you love. And if you don't, more's the pity for not tasting it. I like my coffee bitter and sweet too, dark gold roasted with orange blossom honey. So give the guy a medal who first spoke of it. Sappho, one who is so well spoke, we still speak it. Some were born great, etc., but the thing you had thrust on you, well, you could finish it in your sleep. You know the tune. You knew the lines before they were even uttered. A hook 20 seconds into a James P. Johnson song. Everybody's got a hungry heart. You can wish upon a wishing well. You can stroke the genie lamp just so. You can throw 8 moonstones onto a turquoise handkerchief. It all works. I sang a song of love. It was a dirge. Not that love was dead, but let's be real, it wasn't in full flower. All night, a hard rain fell. It was gnarly, a word my surfer relatives used for anything intense. Waves are often gnarly, and this was a good thing. But the gash you got from being dashed on the reef by that same wave was also gnarly. With a hey and ho, the wind and the rain, Shakespeare said, the rain it raineth every day. Dear wounds and freezing fires, Sidney wrote, to translate love's Petrarchan feeling, which is also a poetic one, of opposites reconciled. It's your cup. Fill it with whatever you want. I sang a song of love. It was a dirge. Not that love was dead, but let's be real. It wasn't in full flower. Give everything to poetry. That's what Diane de Prima says. Give everything to poetry. Scrupulous. And as for the turning of the mic, a zero-sum game by which I suppose was meant it was a jest that added up to nothing. And to think I shared a tea with that man, to think as much as my beauty remained unmanifest, and as much as I was bidden not to think of elephants, so did I amiably, and albeit briefly and professionally, share a tea with that man, who, it was later revealed. Is it true poetry can be anything? We found our works amongst his discarded library, Simonides, Galen, Harriet Mullen, the works of great thinkers, and inexplicably, surfer magazines. Is it true that poetry can be anything? Diane de Prima says, give everything to poetry. I found I wanted to change my mind, not my opinion, but the very fleshy pathways, the neural networks, the brain pan, to scoop out my brains like the seeds of an acorn squash and put them back like melon balls go back inside the hollow of a melon. But I had not the means for such radical revision of my thought, or so I thought. A zero-sum game. My desire, like Julian of Norwich, to be knotted and so oned with a thing she called the Lord, and a thing I called, and a thing I called. I'm not trying to get mystical on you. Sometimes the things that fly out of left field make a bruise upon a perfect sunset, for example, but one that makes a beauty more beautiful, like an auspiciously placed mole upon the cheek. Castles made of sand may be rather prized for their ephemerality than jealously guarded against the dragonish ocean. We do not lick flames. Sunflowers do not count their own petals, hoping to land on the first letter of your name. And yet, they relish your breath when you whisper baby in their would-be ears. It's not like they don't hear. The pine may preach to the night owl, and the pangolin to the pearl, who may better treat of suffering. A night or a heart well shined may appear hard, like lacquer, like the piano is the very mirror, like a cup for to drink the semblance of your liquor. Juice of the prickly pear, stirred in with tequila on the rim of the Grand Canyon at the golden hour, and the whole of a nearish mountain on fire. There'll be no more snow days. The whole world is snow, fire, pungent honeyed jasmine interlaced with reeking lilies. 1,000 joys and 1,000 sorrows is life, as the ancient poet said. Or was it a philosopher L quoted to me in the leas on the ley lines, on the beach when I could sit on it and I could lay on it betimes. And out of the cabbage patch of my plangent woes arose a joyful rose, and in the onion of my soup, a playful cinnamon teased the tongue. Most mornings, coffee presented itself. A patch of sun was there to be stood or sat in. Orion's junk sagged predictably earthward, as if even the heavens were beholden to our heavy gravity. And even the fool ague-cheek was melancholy, whose brain was besought with beef. And the vegan supposed she would eat of the lab-raised meat. Pyramidal, its certain form. Pyramidal, its certain form. Certain it is a form. Wittgenstein or anyone can think of a stag in their mind and not be able to shoot that stag. But where is all the ever-loving antimatter that matter supposedly co-creates? At the end of the dream, the poem. At the end of everything, the end, sighs Sor Juana. The Doors have an 11-minute song called The End, which feels serious when you are 11 and stupid 6 or 8 months later. Nor did I offer up my own dream, which was a meadow in my cup. Meadowtation, ha ha ha. The ship kissed the sands of Galenic shores at the buttressed ends of my dream, where spectacles do not fear to interpose, long fallen out of the mouth of Vishnu. So long, Gabriel, so long, Yusen. Now the instrument of my reflection no longer necessary, since the inside is the out. And I've jiggered the mechanism such that my jacket's always dry and clean. My cock is hard only when I want. No more embarrassing sublunarities. And my cunt is wet just as my lover thinks of fucking it. Cities appear golden to my gaze. A figure, imperial, arises in shadow, long for this world, aching on the threshold of my arse and my one ways and means, lilified cloak and maned with tresses, baldly dignified. The cloak was regal, it did not speak, yet Diogenes leapt on it, yet the trumpets pointed in one direction and trained to a kind of roseate beam, that same pink beam Philip K. Dick saw, emanating from the fish necklace around the neck of the girl he saw in the doorway leaving the dentist office, high on nitrous, that same beam that triangulated with Arcturus, aka Alpha Boetis, to flash up and hit it smack in the third eye till it and we are bent sobbing, having given up our library, having died of the plague and worse, having vowed never again to write with pen and ink, having inscribed Yo la peor, I the worst, in blood on the back of a dirty pamphlet. But oh, what unmiserable mind is this? No me miserum, no limi tangere, nothing miserable, nothing touches me. If there were a kink in the light, or if the note bent a little, we would know we were at the edge of its expressive spectrum, where the blue from the hole turns black in the ice, whose depth is paradoxically a thinness or a place to get fish. You could go down into the dark waters as if groping for a lost balloon, below the brick and bramble and the brambleberries in your throat, choking up your text at first blush. I had it on good authority the west wind came from something more like the south. It was because of the mountains cascading headlong toward the sea and not parallel to it. It was because of the great herons and the sundowner winds. The sweet breath of the zephyr, saith Chaucer, breathes itself into us. Christ, when will it blow? I'm in the corner with the dust and the dust bunnies crying my eyes out. It's no picnic. Well, it is a sort of picnic. There's sand pouring through holes in the picnic basket, and I'm wild except when I'm blue. And then I'm conventional, stalking silhouettes on the curtain and imagining the worst. As for that kink of light in the yonder, and the feeling that blued the note, well, we only know it for its availability to bending. Blue Lotus. The eucalyptus is also called the blue gum. Blue is either the rarest or the commonest color in nature. On the leaf of the lotus, I beheld a drop of dew, which was a drop of glue on cut fabric. Verisimilitude, my one pleasure. Truth seeming was easier to get into 'cause it was everywhere. Like the sky in its common blue breeches, like the sea in its common denim. Was there really any lotus there in the Flying J rest stop, or atop my head blossoming into 1,000 petals? The cock crowed all night while we were in the teepee, confused, we thought, by the full moon. Later, a coyote howled, self-satisfied as its snack had announced itself. The leaves of the gum are like the water that surrounds a melting glacier. Blue's my favorite color, but I'm not unusual in that way. It sells magazines and jeans. We all live in the Uncanny Valley, common as star stuff. I don't care if you love me. There were 60-foot waves in Kauai today. My blood's blue in its veins, and I look good in my jeans. Blue like the sea, and blue like my people in the sea. Ghost drop into my computer sometime. You'll recognize the waxen seal of my love at the iron gates, forged in a storm that does not weep when it rains. I mean a stone that does not bleed, though monsoons whip and hurricanes gnash at it. Waltz into my taxi sometime. I'll hold the door. Dancing backwards runs in my family. So I don't even need to step. My feet does it for me, trippingly but graciously as a tapester, to impress the apple that mine eye had grown to love. Apple, sweet cousin of the rose. Canvas as yet blank on the inside as the dressing betrayed its blush. Feed me with it, and with the krill who can survive the outside decibels of deep sea vents. Yeah, give me excess of it even. Let me roll in its rich soil in the dark with a person I hardly know. I'll read two more. This is called If I Could, I Surely Would. I could fly the ocean, but I could be a fly on the wall, or I could be a fly as hell, but to no great purpose, no witness from a silver plane. I could turn it all into purple prose, a prose that reveled in its circumambulations, as in circling a holy thing, as in moving sunwise around a sacred entity, circularly, or with a fascinator like a duchess, neither to any purpose, perambulating with an umbrella in the sun. Duck at Pleasant Lake, or was it Lake Pleasant, who kept swimming into the swimming area. If I'd had the right shade of blue ink, or if I'd had phthalo, X11, or spectral or Uranian blue, to grind into a dust, to make an ink, to make the neck of the duck shine, I could make it rain in California. I could make a hard and tender rain fall in California and soften the brittle twigs and coat the throat of my sweet fox. I could tell you what I really think. I could lift my heart up to the tune of Be My Lover by LaBouche, or better yet, to Blue Moon as sung by Elvis, Take 4, where he almost yodels, where he employs his smooth falsetto to the clippity-clop percussion of what seems like horses, or like coconuts clapped together to sound like horses, trotting along in 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, the way Monty Python done, wondering whether a swallow could carry the weight of a coconut. And I could eat the meat of that coconut and the dried sweet grapes of yestertime, and no one could stop me, and the wine would not be tinged with smoke, nor the forest singed past arboration, and I could use the blueness to be no longer blue. I could beat back the blues. If I could write, I could have written a poem, beaten blue by the blues, and in spite of the blues and its tinge upon the cuff of my brain. I could have been the best speller of them all, of any decade, and made it be known, but antediluvian Ersbrock and Feldkreis would have taken me down because I bragged and needed to be brought low. Like how Ashka, coyote, lets go of the mouse, how the Chumash tell it, bragging about how it outsmarted the mouse, and the mouse runs away when Ashka opens its mouth. When the coyote begins to brag, when it opens its mouth to brag, if I could have taken some pleasure out of it, I might have sucked on the conch or blew on it in such a way as to make sound occur, a pleasurable sound, or one that it could have called certain spirits forth, or beckoned loved ones to dinner, if we could have dinner, if we could share the air together and talk with each other with our very mouths. I'd cook a meal in 10 steps that could be done in 4. I'd flay the skins of the vegetables myself and julienne them a la Julia, a la Julian. I'd pluck herbs from the garden I would have and mince them so finely to sprinkle over the resultant spread. And I'd visit the cranberry bog of my long desire to see the native berries in their feral habitat, once cultivated, now wilded. And I'd scoop them up in a water, somewhat fresh, in some ways salt, and that the berries, too, would be sweet, sour, salty. Dripping in my palms, I could have tasted them. Were the water clean enough to permit even an overbearing caretaker to allow their dog companion to dip its paws and then lick those paws? I would lick them. I would lick my paws and berries the way the tongue would circle the beloved jewel of the star Antares. Antares that winks like the dark orchid of my asshole, or the gem of Arcturus' genital shining in Boötes, herald of the eve in buttery yellow. I would fall into the butter dish and revel there in carry gold, like the sun nearing the money shot. Even in the East, where such things are rare, there would be a beach, Bagensett Beach, west-facing, and a dune there where we could lie protected among the seagrass and the rose hips. Yes, I would. Yes, yes. And if I could, I would. And if I could, I surely would, as the song says. Well, if I could, I surely would stand on that rock where someone or another stood. Rock with the remnants of ancient creatures who still hear with ears, who hear us yet with ossified ears. Even as the soul of my estate, unhinged and maskless, but grander and canarier, was in the burning west. Even as the soul of my estate, unhinged and maskless, but grander and canarier, was in the burning west. I'll just read one more. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. This is called Skyhammer. I took my skyhammer and pounded out a few choice clouds, Cirrus and, Nimbus, as in a god on earth, moving in space as a great auroral mist. A god who beholds the sparrows washing in the dusty gravel of Frankfurt Avenue, washing in the dust and dirt. God, I miss Cali. and there's a fire in the hills above Goleta, north of Refugio, giving me cause to rant, or giving me means to roll, or to ride with me in the shadowy afterworld beyond the spider of a doubt, along a sidewalk littered with beech leaves, which enchant, like the mist, far beyond mere premise. Don't be plain, said the cloud. Find the ornament that please you best, or elsewise, sugared in stars, go on and rail in a useless manner against the inevitable dawn time. People of the dawn come up drumming and beat on a pillow even when a drum is not available. Happy fortune, fortune has come round for you again. Old ace wheel embalmed in a graceless habitat. Hayseed you could sit on. In this pocket world of a minor horned god, I balanced my lunch in the arms of my ancestors. Tom-cord grapes and weeping cherries. They were my arms, lackadaisic in the sky, 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 holding their sky hammer as if it were the baby Buddha. But really, I want to be honest. I was in a rose garden with only calendulas and an outhouse called the Royal Flush. And I thought, if there was a world beyond, I could become one of those assholes who gets their sugar from fruit and regard the one who points out my faults as a revealer of treasures. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, Arrieu-King, Julian Talamantez Brolaski. Thank you to everyone for coming out. Don't forget to snag books and broadsides before you leave us tonight, and have a great rest of your evening.